This is Bernhard. I am grateful for this process because I think it helps us reflect. I'm not sure if essence is the right word, but who we try to be. And so I've seen so many organizations that just take their name for granted, and after years, people have still very different pictures what their name even means, or if it means anything at all. And so I find the process itself very helpful, and also I see it still as a necessary precondition to have the name issue clarified and settled to scale. I have a bad conscience. There is one voice in my head saying I should have participated more during the process. I'm not very proud of my contribution, since in the last 2 weeks I was very absent, at least in the last 2 weeks. And at the same time, I'm happy to see the wonderful contributions, and also Nora, your PowerPoint with the very good, very inspiring ideas. So I'm very grateful for the people who are contributing to this, and I think the network is doing a good step, and it makes me feel optimistic and hopeful about the network itself. Thank you.
I'll go. This is Beatrice. So I've always mixed feeling with a process like this, because on the one hand, I completely agree with Bernhard in that for me, what's really interesting about it is the process of going deeper into who we are. And that's what I value the most. I found my personal process of finding a possible name very frustrating. And it's challenging because, that's why also I appreciate that Nora is going completely out of the box, because it's like there is some attachment and with a DDO name, and I know we want to value the lineage, and at the same time it creates much restrictions with, when we try to find a new name. So, and I never know personally how far to go in that process. So, so that's where I am. But I also don't feel I have done a huge amount of thinking and into it. Because I think for me, it's more, I enjoy more the conversation around it. This is by sitting by myself in front of a blank page of paper and trying to figure out a name is not that interesting. So.
Yeah, the process for me has been really valuable, even though it was kind of an organic process for me. There were the series of meetings that we had before, and then I had at least one-on-one meetings with somebody that were incredibly useful, because they helped some of the pushing or useful questions that the other person was asking really helped me identify for myself what's important and what the whole relationship in my mind to DDO and Bob and Lisa, and yet what's unique about what we're doing here, I think. So I've got a better understanding, at least for me personally, about where we sit in that whole system, much better than I did a month ago. And I think we'll have an opportunity of having that reflect in the name. That wouldn't have happened without this process. And then just before this time, I was reflecting on this with a couple other people. I have to keep reminding myself to trust my own process in this, because I had a voice in my head that said I should have scheduled an hour or two of sitting quietly and meditating on the name and kind of doing the work. But that never works for me. That's not how creative ideas show up for me. Creative ideas show up for me in the middle of things, in the middle of the night, in the shower, and sure enough, this morning another name showed up after or another way of thinking about the name showed up, and kind of just being in the process. So I have to remind myself to trust the process, trust myself, and keep going. So I don't have any idea what you guys are all going to think about that, but it's at least been helpful to me.
No, I also have really appreciated I think I was in 2, maybe 3 with this meeting discussions about this, and just understanding the connection to DDO, the why of that. I think, just as a very living example, hearing, I think, Brian, I don't know if it was the first meeting, I think it was, is it Lisa? My name's mixed up. Just as a living, breathing example of, what it is that needs to change, what are we doing, what are we not doing. So I thought it was a great life example of what we're doing, realizing that a name is going to be just by its very nature, a derivative of that. So it's going to be what we put in that name. Our name could be O, and if it's what we put into that name that's going to make the network, and a name can be very useful. So just being with both of that, and then just trying to make explicit what I did. I wasn't even 100% sure if my energy was for this last meeting, but just thinking through my own process of what should a name do or not do, just reconnected me to this process and made me think, yeah, I guess I should be part of this discussion. So, so without going into content or thoughts or pros or cons, I've really appreciated the process, and I agree. I wouldn't be where I'm at now as far as the connection to the network and to the naming process if it hadn't been through the last couple weeks, month that we spent together on this.
All right, should we think together a little bit about what the process for this meeting should be? I think there's, normally I would have started again with purpose and premises. I think the 4 of us are pretty connected to purpose and premises, but even intentionally, that's a beginning place. We certainly have, we came up with the design guidelines for the name, the 3 that were in the Lumio, that I think can ground us. And then we have a list of names that have been proposed that I believe our intention was not necessarily to choose from that list or to vote on that list, but to use that list as inspiration, if it happens, as to what could be generated from that. Those are kind of some of the basic things. And then I've put together those suggested names in a Google Doc, which is in the chat, just so we have a place where you can see them all together.
Thank you. And then as I tried to put, and I don't know if we're at that point yet, so if we don't feel we're there, I'm fine with that. But really what started becoming present to me is what is a name supposed to do? So something as fundamental, which I shared, as whatever we end up calling this, we're going to shorten it. because nobody's going to say the whole name every single time. My middle name's Elizabeth. My parents wanted to name me Elizabeth, and at the end they said, well, we don't like Beth, we don't like Liz, we don't like Lizzie. So it became my middle name because they didn't want it to be shortened. So I use that as an example of, are there some filters or criteria that we need to start thinking about so that the name is, you know, we can kick the tires on this, on how it's used, what it's doing. So that may be a next step, but it's very present for me in terms of how will the name actually be used. So that's one example of some possible filters or criteria.
Nora, is your name already part of the list of Brian?
Yeah, I think so. 6 and 7. Yep.
Because the acronym is not there. That's the reason I was looking for the acronym. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any other process suggestions? Or?
Maybe could you say something again about how you think about the next steps after this? So is it some kind of Lumio, I don't know, voting, or what's your picture about what we would do after this?
I'm not, I guess I'd like to talk about that. There's part of me that would be okay making the decision here, right? The Lumio process has been completely open. The whole process has been open and transparent. But I don't know whether it would be good to confirm that with the network if we do end up making an advocacy in this group. I guess I'd be interested in your guys' opinion. But if we settle on one name during this time, yeah, I guess I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting, sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Part of me wants to say, just go, just choose it and go.
Well, sorry, I keep thinking you finished and I'm not waiting long enough.
And another part of me says, wait, we've got a network here, and it would be good. So I'm not sure.
Well, one process could be is see where we're at this end of this meeting and not put it out to a vote, but saying the group that did get together today is, you know, hopefully getting closer to landing on what we feel through this process is the best. It could be one more data gathering of posting all the names and having people pick their first, second, and third, not to say it's going to be a vote, but yeah, I find it kind of interesting to see, does everybody go for 3 names? Well, that's kind of interesting. Or are we all over the board? Or so that's a possibility, not saying we're going to do it by vote, but just saying as we finalize our decision, if anybody would like to, you know, 1, 2, and 3 this, please feel to do so. So possibility, not a. We can wait till the end to see if we get the quiet ping of truth and saying it's this. But even still, it'd be kind of curious to see if nobody picked it. It's just information. With a quick turn.
I don't know if that's useful or actually making things more complicated, but personally, when I think of a name, I'm also thinking of a visual. I'm thinking of a logo, and I'm thinking of something that build on the name and express add to the name also, so that the name doesn't have to hold everything. There is something that can be expressed in a graphic that can complement. So that might be something that we need to hold in our mind as well.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that today when I was walking our dog, that and maybe this is another filter, but what I'm hearing on the concern that there's so many labels associated with, you know, for example, living systems or environment, is that, you know, ecological? Is it, so are there things that can be brought into the logo that express a feeling and a way of being in the world that helps without spelling it out, or, you know, getting people to say, oh, I thought you were X, or, you know, Earth blah, or whatever. So I had the same thought, Beatrice. There are other ways to communicate a feeling or a essence.
My hope would be that we could here come up with more than one option that all of us think are good enough, so that we come up with, let's say, 3 options, and the 4 of us would be happy with each of them, and then we can offer them and have some kind of voting, or some kind of resistance voting, or some kind of consent decision with concerns and objections, but that the 4 of us have more than one option. What I would not want to do is offer options that we ourselves do not think are good enough, and then have some voting about it. So this, maybe we just come up with one option, or maybe not even one option. That's another thing then. But my hope would be that we can offer more than one option, and then we would be happy with either result. This would be my hope. I'm not sure if this would be a good signal if just the 4 of us would kind of make a decision. I'm a bit concerned that this could put a mark in the history of the network, that the legend would be that the founder again just did what he did.
Okay, good.
So I would be happy to just start and then come back to the process afterwards again.
Okay.
If it's okay for you. Mm-hmm.
Well, should I start maybe with what's become clear to me through this process? And this is what's been going through my mind this past few days. And they're partially represented in the 3 principles, right? We design guidelines that we used for this. So we consider ourselves part of the DDO lineage and want to honor and respect the lineage, number 1. Number 2, we are committed to working from a paradigm of a living and interconnected universe. And number 3, we are evolving what it means to be a DDO. The more I sat with those 3 guidelines, the more they made sense to me. So I think I personally have wrestled a lot with, am I okay with being a DDO or not okay with being a DDO? And do I want to be part of the club or not part of the club? And you know, those of you that know me better know I've got this rebellious part that doesn't want to be a part of a club that will have me. And this has really helped to say, of course we're part of the DDO lineage, right? I mean, we were, Decurion, for example, helped found the whole DDO space, and to try to deny that or walk away from that in some way, shape, or form would be silly and not particularly constructive. So of course we're part of the DDO lineage, and it was really it was really healthy to feel settled about that for the first time ever. But then it goes with the other two that says, just because we're part of the DDO lineage doesn't mean we are the entire DDO lineage, right? We're not doing everything that could be considered a DDO, and I don't feel like I can, and I'm not sure it makes sense to try to represent the entire territory or the entire space. So pretty early in this network, this idea of paradigm awareness and dealing with the whole system right from the beginning, from the very first time I introduced it, I said, we're not doing everything around the DDOs. We're only dealing with whole organizations, and we're only dealing with practitioners, and we're only dealing with, with a portion of it. And then that has become stronger as the notion of being alive and life-giving and designing for organizations and systems, that are alive and life-giving. As my understanding of that has deepened, and I think has become more and more committed to operating in that space. So I'm seeing it. You articulated it really well, Bernard, at one point of wanting one of those cool whiteboards that explain everything. That looked at the whole evolution of the different paths and how they came together and diverged, and so it makes sense to me about NextJump and Bridgewater and Decurion starting decades ago with this stuff. And there's some way that we came together through the scientist Bob Keegan starting to research us, and the naming of the space around deliberate development, around DDO, and then the path, the branch that we're on within this has taken a turn toward living systems. And it in part joined up with what Carol's doing, although I don't think it's defined by what Carol's doing. But it is defined by this turn toward life and designing for life and designing for a world that has the potential to be alive and interconnected. So it feels very good to me to say, yeah, we're that branch of the DDO lineage. We're not the only branch. There's many other, there could be many other branches of it, but this is the branch we're working on. And as that, we should signal that. We should signal both the fact that we come from the DDO lineage, but we're evolving in our own particular way on this branch of it. And I think that's going to be really helpful, because that signaling then can say, we don't have to have an opinion about the other branches of it. We don't have to be judgmental or to have an evaluation about that. But this is what we're doing here. And if that part of it is interesting to you or pulling you in some ways, then come join us. Anybody is welcome. But if you want to work on something else in the DDO lineage, that's possible too. So I'm curious on how that lands for the three of you.
Yeah, for me, it's complete. So it's round, complete. And I still have your sentence in mind with the kind of be yourself without making others wrong. So it could be the same motto for your network.
No, I agree. I think that's been, in many ways, this question of, include, exclude, right, wrong, lineage, new thing, rejection. The way you've described that, Brian, I think is rings true to me, and kind of doesn't pull it apart. It builds on it, and that doesn't mean there aren't still going to be people who say, I don't know, it feels easier to have that conversation than the, you know, if you're doing this, then, you know, we're not interested in, because we think it's not the way to go, kind of a thing, versus just different branches that come from a equal pull. And that's something I've felt for a long time. Even with the three companies, Right, Wrong, or Indifferent, that the book was written by, all three of those companies were doing some pretty dramatic things to change assumptions about what's possible. And so, you know, it's that rather than sit there and pick them apart, just let everybody find their own way through that journey, which feels pretty living systems to me.
Yeah, if I had to summarize it, I would say it's discernment without judgment. And it's interesting that this is about paradigm discernment. So I'm also holding this idea of how the name and what we bring around the name invite a conversation, invite some questions and a conversation, and then people are free to make any kind of decision of which path they want to follow. But at least this is, if the name could evoke a question saying, so, you know, what is the distinction? And again, I'm paying attention to words here. It's not difference, it's distinction. And how do you distinguish yourself from the original DDO?
I was just wondering, I don't think I get the difference between the two terms, difference and distinction. Is it about judgment, about better or worse, or what's the
difference separates and create polarity. Distinctions, it's like you're using the DDO overall as kind of the background, but now out of this background there is something else that came out of it, and you're seeing it. So it's like how you distinguish an object from a landscape. And here the DDO, the traditional DDO is a landscape. It's kind of it's a canvas that started, right? And then from that, there is something that is distinct from about what we are doing, and which is the relationship to life and wholeness.
Atalaska makes a difference between, is it figure or is it figure ground? So is it a figure in front of a background, or is it two figures? Is this similar? I'm not sure.
Because the DDO, because our network has emerged out of the DDO network, Kagan's DDO network, the Kagan network has to be the background, and there is something that emerged out of it.
Yeah.
And your explanation was beautiful, almost poetic, Beatrice. And when Bernhard asked again, I looked up, and unfortunately, refinement is the process of removing impurities or unwanted elements. So I think it's back to just what are words, names going to, but I love your definition, Beatrice. It was very helpful to me on the lack of polarization. I think that's, and yet distinction, so people are clear on which branch they are choosing to stand on or be with.
So one of the things I was struggling with was it seemed like any of the terms that I came up with you might have said this, Nora, were terms that kind of have baggage with them, right? If I use living system, living system, there's a bunch of different ways that people think about living systems. Ecosystem as, so in thinking about it the last couple of days, I kind of kept on going, well, what's more basic than that? What's more basic than that? What's more basic than that? And what I started kind of had an aha moment of just going to the aliveness of something isn't a system or isn't a theory or isn't a method. When you just talk about an organization that is alive, for me, that's more experiential and more direct. Going, yeah, and when I think about it personally, that's kind of what I've always wanted, was to be part of something that was alive. And then I've gotten all complicated in my theories and approaches and trying to understand what makes something alive and how you get there, and is it in relationship to a bigger system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that experience of aliveness, particularly in an organization, for me is first and foremost an experience that I think us humans can connect to. So I'm wondering if there's something direct like that, and living organizations probably has baggage too, but that's what I was kind of going for. Was I think there might be a way of pairing the deliberate part, which gives the respect and honoring our DDO roots, with the alive part that says, and this is what we're paying, this is what we're moving toward on this branch of the DDO lineage.
I'm sorry for asking a technical question. There are so many people in the document. Did you share the link somewhere else? Or is it just us and Google is making weird things? So on my screen, it looks as if there would be about 10 people in the document.
I see 8, which is more than 4. That's interesting.
Don't know much.
You did not.
We can all agree on that. I
didn't
had
share
it
it
pulled
on
up, but now I'm having a difficult time pulling it up again.
8 total viewer. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so
No,
just
I did not share it anywhere. I just
okay. That was just my question. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Anonymous. And if you put your mouse on it, it will say Anonymous Chipmunk or Dingo.
You're really singing the praises of Google to me right now. I've got this thing about not jumping in.
I want to be the camel myself.
Okay. Ah, okay. So for me, it would be the right time to explain the different options that are there, or maybe that some of you shared. Or would, and another process would be that we are kind of the people who have not invented a term come up with a reaction just from reading the term without hearing a background information.
Right.
These would be 2 different processes.
I'm just literally, I'm trying to re-pull it up. For some reason, it's not.
So Bernard, are you suggesting that each one of us go through and give our impression?
Maybe just because, well, time, I don't know if it, but what if each of us pick the 3 that are most resonating with us right now, so we can kind of talk about that, just to see if there's any overlapping?
Well, I think what Bernard is saying is the original process was that people would not only suggest a name, but give some rationale, give some explanation about why they were suggesting the name.
Right.
And with the idea that the actual name itself might not be the thing, but it's the way of thinking about it that is going to be helpful in cultivating the space. So that's kind of what I just did with the bottom. Mine are the four at the bottom, 8, 9, 10, 11, which are just different versions on the same theme of I'm the first part of that, a deliberately developmental practitioner network, for me really hits a sweet spot between the deliberately developmental part, re-evokes the DDO, the deliberately developmental organizations, right? It uses 2 of the 3 words. But instead of saying organization, it says practitioner. And so it continues the lineage. I think it's a strong way of signaling the lineage that we come from. So the DDPM would be the acronym there that I bet we would use. And as opposed to right now, I noticed that I have and a few others have started using DDO.
Oh, and right.
Right. So that first part of it, I think, does a good job of signaling the lineage. But then the second part of it is I was trying 4 different versions of saying what I just said, of going toward just organizations that are alive, going toward something that is alive. And so my 2 options there were the difference between living organizations. Is that open enough? Is that, does that have enough? Is there too much baggage on that, or is that a clean enough term? Or life-giving organizations, which I was a little less happy with, because I bet there'd be questions about what it means to be life-giving as opposed to just alive. And then I was experimenting with, is it for living organizations, or are we moving toward living organizations? Because there's, trying to signal the process of none of us are there yet. And then, are we in the process of growing it? I've noticed in the last month that I'm becoming increasingly curious about, everybody says building an organization. And do you really build a living organization, or do you grow it? Building is kind of the old pieces, parts sort of things, as opposed to growing as a more alive notion to it. So I'm of those 4, I'm quite happy with the first part of it, the deliberately developmental practitioner network. That just has a really solid ring to me as a quiet thing of truth. But I'm not sure about the second part of it, other than I'm looking for this way of just saying, we want to the experience of a living, something that's alive, is what I feel like I'm committing to now.
I suspect that the number 10 should read for life-giving organization and not living-giving.
Yeah, sorry.
I thought he maybe had a jingle associated that we were in.
Not that one, the one toward living, and life-giving. Yeah. So this is really interesting, because they mean, if I look, they mean very different things. Growing living organization means you're working with organization and you're growing life into those organizations. For life-giving organization, you're growing organization that are life-giving for a larger system. So from my perspective, and I don't know if growing life-giving organization is too many words, but this is to me the most accurate in terms of how I think ourselves working when we consider nested systems and that, and looking at not only what happened in the organization, but what happened in the customer, in the market, in the communities, in the larger system.
And it could be interpreted at many levels, I bet, right? People's initial understanding of that might be just that the organization is life-giving within it. You know, although we know that it probably needs to go further than that.
Right.
So even
it has it in it. You can.
Right. Is it life-giving for its employees?
Yeah.
Right. Is it life-giving for its customers? Is it life-giving? So you can ask. It prompts a lot of questions that would be useful questions.
Did I hear you correctly? Growing life-giving organizations?
Yeah.
Number 12. Yeah. No, so it was very helpful, Beatrice, you're combining those two things and making that distinction. I didn't see it before, and I agree with that. You know, my thought is, if it's just deliberately developmental practitioner network, it can sound like it's a one-on-one, and what we're developing is individuals. So I think it's very important that there's something in the name that implies a system or a plural or interconnectedness. So organization certainly does that. So that's where that serves. And then, as you said, Brian, I think, you know, whether it's living systems or life, or I do think there's going to be a lot of interpretation for that. And I think it's a great descriptor, and, you know, prompts questions, i.e. why we're just not saying growing organizations. So all of that makes sense to me. Visually, I almost see it like the deliberately developmental practitioner network with, you know, whether it's a line or something, and then underneath it, growing life-giving organizations, because it's just a long run-on name. So I think there are things that can be done to kind of have the bottom level be in support of of the deliberately developmental practitioner network. Well, what are you practicing? We're deliberately developmental in service of growing life-giving organizations. So
yeah, I've always assumed
12, I think I'm landing on 12 as we sit here right now, from what I've heard and thought about so far.
So for me, again, in terms of what it is and what it represent, the 12 is the closest. If I add the idea of logographic of it, if we were, and because it's very long, so if we were shortening the first part, now we are losing the reference to the DDO. Because, you know, when you have DDO and I played with a number 4, with a square, or with something that say it's DDO plus something else, or it's DDO with a difference. But here we are losing it. So that would be DDPN, or which will not, when people read it, they will not make the connection to the DDO.
Yeah,
They'll not make connection to the DDO or to the growing life-giving organizations.
So the rationale here is that a lot of people have been coming to us, have been attracted to us because of the DDO word, acronym. They recognize this acronym, and then they come in, and then they engage with a conversation, mostly with Brian, and then he brings the additional dimension of the life giving, and then they decide whether they're in or out. But they were attracted to the DDO network. If we lose that acronym, then people will not, if they read DDP or DDPN, it's not going to resonate as DDO.
And you think that this pull is continuing, that it's an ongoing, that the DDO is kind of here to, not to stay forever, but it's still important to us as future pull?
I think as a pull, it still works. And yeah, I think so. And I mean, you're the best judge of that, Brian, because you are the one who are mostly talking, and you just had 2 experience recently on public events. So
yeah, well, it's interesting because in the conscious capitalism world, it was present there. There were people that knew about DDO and were a small number that were very excited to meet me and talk to me about it and things like that. In the cultural ambassadors before that, it was much less present there. It was like there was one or 2 people that knew about it. But I think it will be I think it's important to continue that link, but I'm not sure it has to be literally in the name in order to maintain that link. So I could imagine, for example, us having a website that explains the connection, where we would use the term DDO in the website paragraph, about us or describing our lineage and our branch. By using that in the website, Google would find us when you search for DDO. But then we would make the connection to deliberately developmental organization, to deliberately developmental practitioner, right? For life giving. And so it's a bridge to get from one to another. And I think just from a business point of view, Keegan and Andy recently unveiled kind of their new way of talking about DDO and the growing edge and some of the language shifts they're doing, some of the innovations they're doing around apps. So that whole world is growing in theirs. And I did notice that when they sent out the materials, that DDO had a little trademark by it. So DDO is a trademark term that I think now's the time to no longer use it exactly the way the trademark is.
That's helpful, because on our previous call, that was my assumption that sooner or later would be an issue, but I thought I heard in the call that we didn't think that would be an issue, not that anything's guaranteed.
It's still open as whether it be an issue. I think it depends on how we use it, whether it be an issue, right? I think if there's ever a overlap in business segments, or where they feel that we're representing something differently than they're representing, and I think it could become an issue. The way we're doing it right now, I don't think it would be. I think Andy and Bob would continue to let us practice. But we're just at the beginning of this journey with the network, and I don't know what we're going to grow into. And if we start offering courses, for example, I don't know.
Beatrice, how do you feel about I'm just thinking, if someone Googles DDO, would they find this network? I don't know, but how do you feel about it being in the story on the website, on the materials, whatever, versus, is that enough?
Could be. I mean, if I look at it from a purely technology perspective, it depends how our website is built, I guess. We could make sure that the word DDO becomes a tag that is attached to the website and will show up. So, but I think we have to be conscious, mindful of it, and make sure this happens, because I think we want to show up when people Google DDO. I think I'm glad you mentioned the trademark issues. It's true, and that might be an issue. So maybe maybe it's okay to just have it in our, in our language, whether it is a language on the website or in our story when we meet people, and maybe not in the name. For people who pay, there's a lot of people who pay attention to acronyms and they forgot what the acronym mean. But for people who are really serious, have read the book, they will connect to the deliberately developmental, because that's the key word, right? That the deliberately is really critical. It is what connects to DDO. So that might be enough.
Well, yeah, and those two together. In fact,
right.
I don't think we have to worry about it, but you look at number 12 and we've put 5 words in between it, but it's delivery developmental organizations. So I think we're okay, but one could almost argue it's a derivative of like saying Coca, brown cola. So I think it's about as close as we can get without, looking like the exact same name.
So I'm wondering, if we take option 12, what would be the acronym and what would be the spoken shorthand that we would use? And maybe it's a difference if you are more or less first, second generation until now, or if you join in a year. I'm wondering if I will stop calling it the DDO network. Or would we then try to encourage ourselves to call it the DDP network?
Yeah, the DDPN is kind of hard to say. So I think it will become the DDP network. It's just, I think it's easier for me anyway than the DDPN. It's kind of hard to. But
you would recommend that we start talking about the DDP network and
yeah, I don't think there's any way to get life-giving organizations, all of that into the.
No, my question is different. My question would be, until now we are calling it the DDO network, also in shorthand. And would we try to say, you mean the DDP network? So try to encourage each other to make this.
Oh yeah, I think my experience with that is that happens pretty darn quickly. We have an industry convention that's been around forever that was called Show West forever. I mean, literally, and had to change it for legal purposes to CinemaCon, and it took everybody about a year and a half, 2 years. People have been living with it, and it happens. It just, you may have a little overlap of, it's not Show West anymore. And that was a whole different name. So I feel good that will happen quick enough.
I would also see myself, for example, talking with a PowerPoint slide or just writing the whole term, deliberately developmental practitioner network, growing life-giving organizations, and then making a mark around DDO. And here making the link to the lineage. So taking the last O from organizations and also clarifying this is how we are connected. This is where we're coming from. So for me, this would be a good title also to tell a story about the network and its history and its branches, etc.
So the tech people may call it the DDP net.
We're spending spending a lot of time on 12. Is there another name that somebody could tell a story about or explain? Nora, do you want anything, say anything about?
No, as I said in my thing, what I really focused on, what you guys are addressing is, let's be realistic of what's actually going to be called day to day. So that last conversation is helpful for that. The plural aspect of it, which I also mentioned, so given that, like I said in my thing, I was going over, is there a word that is easy to say that instead of DDPN, or DDP network doesn't mean anything, is there a word? And again, the one I came up with, I also came up with DIOS, but I didn't think we'd want to use DILS as our acronym. So God may be a little too controversial. So that's, I think I was in the same line of country. So I appreciate us realizing that nobody's going to be saying all of this when we're talking to each other, but it can be explained. And I think it's far enough away from the DDO, the way it says there, the DDP network, Growing Life-Giving Organization. I mean, there's enough in that it just doesn't look like we just changed a couple things. So I was in, maybe you would know this, Bernhard or Beatrice, I was in Ireland and Scotland, and they have TK Maxx there instead of TJ Maxx. It's the exact same logo, but instead of TJ, it's TK. And so I'm fascinated. I got to look it up to say, is that because they're different tax laws? Did somebody just change one letter? It looks exactly the same. So this doesn't look, there's enough difference in there that it just doesn't look like we're trying to, steal a name or what's the word, or the branding and the good, strong, what's the word, goodwill that's already built into that, their work.
I had to remember, I looked that up before. TK Maxx is a subsidiary of TJ Maxx.
Okay.
There is a British retailer called TJ Hughes.
Oh, okay.
And
that got too confusing.
So
okay. Okay. And there's another one called Super Mac that looks just like McDonald's. So I go, so that's another one that was, even though there are McDonald's there. And what's the name? Their thing is Way to Grow, right? So that's the name of the company. So grow and growing, I think we're okay. But I don't know that I'd capitalize, and minor point, but I don't think I'd capitalize. I'd just capitalize the G of growing. So Growing Life-Giving Organizations. It feels.
Especially as a subtitle.
Yeah. And I think 1, 2, and 3 is really trying to get at the same thing. So we're all very close in the same line of country here.
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3 came out of the original call that started this process. So I forget.
Didn't Steve Green throw out several? Is that Steve's? Do we have Steve's?
I think Steve might be 5.
I thought 1, 2, and 3 was Steve's.
5 is me.
Yeah, I think 4 and 5 is
5 is me. I think number 2, Living DDoNet practitioner. I forgot. I was in that meeting, but I don't remember.
Are you re-looking at it, Brian? I just want to make sure. I thought he threw up 3 of them. They were helpful, but I may be combining.
Yeah, developing organizational. Yeah, I did miss those. I'll throw them here at the bottom.
Okay, great, thanks. Because I know they were helping me, the potential, so that's a nice word. organizational. It almost would be interesting to bold out how many times the same words are showing up in each one, but got a lot of deliberately, got a lot of developing. Organization is in a lot of them. Surprise, surprise, DDO.
Nora, would you want to say something about intentional? So that we,
yeah, well, I thought under the having to get away from DDO, and in one of our calls, it might have been Susan, I forget, said that for them, deliberately, another word for deliberately was intentional, which I agree. Those words feel, and deliberately is a mouthful. And then I like the action of developing. It's not passive. So we're developing intentional blah. But that was my thought on intentional.
but it's rather a solution to find another word that expresses the similar content, like deliberately.
Right, and
it's not that intentional contains something more valuable or more precise.
No, they're close. Like I said, I think intentional, I agree with Beatrice or whatever, deliberately definitely ties us to that lineage. I like the word intentional. So if it had been intentionally developmental organizations, I think we'd be all here saying, you know, good word, but no. And I like the action of developing, and it's close to developmental, but it's active versus passive. But a DIO, so the DIO network, growing life-giving systems, or organization, sorry, well, organization would be twice, so. Don't feel strongly over one versus the other.
Feels a little bit like we just switched a word out.
Thank you, Brian, for inserting the another 3 options. These are from Steve?
Yes.
The DOP network.
I'm just watching my own thought process. So one voice says, well, let's take 12, that's it. And another voice is saying, well, how can we offer some kind of options or some kind of choice for the network that it doesn't feel like a decision?
Well, to your question earlier, Bernhard, are there any other names here that we would say if 12 didn't exist, or let's just do 9 through 12, right? Because that we would say we would be okay with.
Yeah. So for me, the idea of good enough is helpful. So which options would be good enough?
What about number 13? If it's just based on this conversation, and if Steve is on the phone, unfortunately, he's not. I'm throwing this out. Developing potential network hyphen growing life-giving organizations.
Brian, are you inserting it or? Okay.
And again, going back to our filters, if we feel strongly we want it to kind of resonate with DDO, that would be I think a downside of that, right? Developing organizational, it would be a DOP network.
Sorry, what did you
And
say?
then inserting what you had at the end, hyphen growing life-giving organizations. So that's the potential the network is developing. I'm just trying to, because otherwise I like, it just feels like this, well, maybe that's not a true statement. Let me sit with Steve some more. Developing organization potential network doesn't have life system, doesn't have deliberate or intentional.
Yeah, the link back to DDO would be harder to make.
It's harder to make the link back.
You could probably do it, but it's less obvious.
Yep. Because that's another thing we could do is do 12, explain why, list the rest. Well, you're saying you don't want to do it, but ask the group to look at the list. And if, you know, I hear you on, you know, and particularly because it was Brian's idea, that there may just be a feeling of, okay, well, that's the way it went, but maybe explaining what, like we just did, or well, I guess they could listen to our video, right? They're interested. So maybe that's a requirement, listen to the video, and, you know, if there's something else that pops up. So developing potential network, developing potential network, is that the same thing twice?
Deliberate potential.
Oh, deliberate, sorry. Get my D straight.
It doesn't mean anything, deliberate potential network. It
Yeah.
really doesn't. It's,
Yeah, I think the second one is. So let's go to 14, developing whole organizations network.
And I had offer number 5, which was practitioners for whole developmental organization network.
So how would you make the link back to DDO, and how would you make the link to Alive?
The whole organization to me is applies to living systems. You don't have a whole system which is not a living system. It's so that's the whole. Yeah, that's life is captured into whole. I have to admit that I'm starting to struggle because I'm gaining more and more attachment to the 12.
And I'm just realizing that I didn't click the load previous button on Lumio, so I missed Mark and Steve and Susan, so I just added them.
But other than that, maybe that's the 4 and the 8.
So 16, 17, 18.
Yeah, I think living system is way too loaded with different interpretation. It's not precise enough.
Well, I think if what's happened with me in this meeting is if we are really saying, look, we want our name to show that we are a branch of this DDO beginning, then that's a strong filter. So that would, well, I don't want to say what it would rule out, but certainly 17, 15. You know, and even 16, you know, I don't think we want to look like we're trying to be the same thing and we just change one name, one word. So is anybody, I would always love to have fun with this. I don't know how much time we have, but if 12 is not available, if 9 through 12 are not available because they're all kind of variations on the theme on DDP network, is there anything else that we would say, yeah, that would? With possibly adding that life-giving you know, that last hyphen if that's what's needed.
What I'm just trying to do is developing like a matrix using the 3 criteria as check criteria for all the names. So if you go, Nora, if you go to the total bottom of the document, when you would see that what I was trying to do here. So having all the names and having the 3 criteria and then having like a check or it doesn't really fit. And so these 3 criteria are like, how do you call them?
They're filters or criteria.
Yeah, I could.
Yeah, but that's, if I'm looking at the number 1, for instance, the living colon is not, it's not going to capture the challenge unless you write it down instead of checking. Because for me, using living system in the name is really an issue.
Okay, well then maybe the 3rd column, I don't know what the 3rd is, developing DDO. What does that mean, Bernhard? Because maybe number 3 is it going to be confusing? You know, what's the word we talked about earlier that it's got too much baggage.
Yeah.
So maybe column 3 is baggage issue.
So
well, it's column 3 and column 2.
So these are the design guidelines. This is the idea.
Right. We're committed to working for impaired living rep, and we are evolving what it means to be a DDO.
So this would be.
Yeah. So, so maybe there's a 4th, Brian, I feel like this is what we talked about yesterday on the kind of, you know, what's the risk? What we don't want it to do is to come in with any kind of overused language. So maybe that's a 4th criteria. And we identified a 5th criteria too, which is it needs to be easy to say. I mean, we can't have something that is a tongue twister and we never get around to. So at the risk of overcomplicating, so there's baggage, and then the 5th is, yeah, easy to use. It's
And part of the baggage for number 4 is I don't think we can use DDO trademark.
right. So if we go, let's just practice with number 1. Let's see how quickly we can do this. Just give it a, what are we doing here? We give it, their checks, meaning they are, so I would say no baggage for 4. So every check is a good thing. So 4 is no baggage rather than baggage. So number 1, that wouldn't get a check, right? 2,
Well, living system is a baggage.
right, so you don't get a plus there because there is baggage.
Right.
Trying to get, so X means good, not X means missing.
Maybe that's easier with a plus and minus, or
Whatever you guys want. So that's a plus on number 1. Before, and I like this because it's kind of a double check versus what our gut, heart, and soul tells us. So it just gives us another way in. So it's not like we're going to add it up, but it may point something. So paradigm for living, I think it's a plus, right? Because it does say living system.
so my idea would be also, given the limited time, if there is just one minus in an option, the option falls out.
Yeah.
Right? So we have,
Okay, fine.
we have one minus here, that's enough to kick it
Okay,
out, right?
and I think we're going to be okay, but I would have an issue if we didn't talk about organization, group, something other than an individual. So I assume that's the DDO lineage, but just to say, that would be important to me. Okay, any minuses on number 2?
Just the DDO trademark.
For me, the living DDO is a challenge.
Yeah.
Is there a dead DDO? I mean, I think that's what.
It sounds a little judgy, yeah.
Yeah.
We're part of the living practice.
Sorry, guys.
I don't know what you're all doing.
You
but
were
we're
so
hired.
yesterday, yeah. Okay, so minus there. And it would be tough under the 5 too, because you'd call it the LDDOP. It's
I think 3 might make it through with no minuses.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, life with the capital F, it
Yeah.
certainly is thought provoking.
4 doesn't work because of trademark.
And you think we'd be okay with 3, Brian, if we started doing educational materials and whatever?
If we are with 12, we'd be with 3 too.
Well, 3, yeah, there's just more stuff in 12, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're okay with life, that implies more than just individuals, that this isn't a one-on-one.
Doesn't mean it's the perfect name. It just survives the 5 criteria, I think.
Yeah. So maybe 6 is something about, this is not a life coach organization, right? Okay.
For 5, I don't, and we're probably not going to get, so do we want to, we got 7 minutes left. Do we want to try to get through this list, or do we want to do this as homework, or?
It'd be nice to go through this now.
Yeah, if we can quickly, like
Okay.
Bernhard said, just to kind of say, do we have 2 that we would, where do we end up with? So practitioners for whole developmental organizations network, P4DWO.
I think we get a minus on the lineage.
Okay, and also, well, DON, development organization, yeah. And it's not easy to say. The P4WDO is P4WDO. Lots of syllables in there.
And so I think the next 5, 6, and 7 all get a minus on the lineage. It's not obvious that it has anything at all to do with the DDO, for me at least.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that, unless anybody else has any.
8, well, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 is what we were talking about, right?
we've already gone through. So,
So does living organization have baggage?
I think it does, but
Certainly,
I don't know if,
there are certainly books that have been written about it.
yeah.
okay, so do we, okay, where are we now?
Yeah, for life living.
I was getting confused with the numbers. I'm sorry.
So what are we saying on 8? Do we give it a minus or not?
I don't know if you get a minus, but when you compare it to 12, life-giving is much better than living. So
Yeah.
living organization. So it would have to be for life-giving organization. And then we're going back to, this is yours. This is the growing. Same for with a 9.
Well, and as I think Beatrice said earlier, what's good about life giving is that it implies not only within, but out, reaching out. So I like the duality of that.
I think we're back to 12. And personally, I would, if we had 3 candidates, I don't think I would mind sharing the 3 candidates, but I would not go with 2 candidates. I would show our choice and then all the choices and letting people go back to the original list.
Well, let's just finish it off at 13 and 14 just to finish the process, right?
Developing.
So we've got developing organizational potential network, DOPN. Did we already talk about this?
I mean, I think we tried to turn that into.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Boy, my memory here. So developing potential network, DPN. And you were worried, Brian, that wasn't close enough to DDO?
Right. Right.
Okay. So that would be the check for, yeah, oh, is that where you got the minus? Okay. And 14, developing whole organization network. So the same issue, right? Yeah. So I agree with Beatrice. I would say we say after going through, and if those who want to hear, or if Brian, or, I don't know, Bernhardt, if you want to do it, the kind of reason why we chose this, or tell people to listen to the video, I don't know, but that this is, and we went through the criteria and this is where we landed, and let people, kind of go from there.
So I would contradict myself now and say, or say something different than I said before. I would also settle with the number 12 and add a few sentences why we did it, and invite people to look at the video and to look at the document maybe. And I'm not sure if so what we would need to finish the process then. So I'm not sure, maybe it is like a time frame until when to object.
Or until when to comment, or if you feel strongly about something, maybe it's contacting one of the four of us.
Yeah.
And having a conversation about it. And, you know, because I don't think we want this to be a, you know, a social media Twitter feed kind of a thing where we're kind of ending up with versus if, you know, Susan has a serious concern, please contact one of the four of us. I mean, they can post it, but contact to have a conversation. And then maybe there's a date where we bring all that in and say, does this change anything? Or they join the,
Yeah, I would like that. So I would see two phases. So one phase would be after posting it, that people would comment, and if they have serious objections, that they contact one of us and have a dialogue.
right. So
And
we can
then
flesh it out, or questions, you know, that,
Yeah,
that go
exactly.
beyond a posting.
And then have a dialogue where we are kind of inviting more people and again and saying, so this is now the new name. We're kind of celebrating it and also kind of explaining it and showing how we would use it to explain who we are. And also tape it and have like a 15-minute explanation of the term. So like a start. So my question would be, how can we have like a moment where we would say, so now this is our name and this is our start.
I see it as almost three. The comment, I don't know, I ask you guys, you're better about this, and if there are questions on there, are we saying put your questions on there, questions, comments? If you feel strongly about something, please, and also watch the video. So, you know, there's just commitment in there versus, you know, and if after all of that, you feel strongly about something, again, whether it's one of the four of us or whatever, reach out, and then maybe it's the four of us reconnecting and possibly bringing somebody in if somebody's got I don't know about the bringing. And then the third part is what you said, Bernard, is this is the new name, assuming nothing happens to, and how do we talk about it as a broader community? So I guess my question is the feel strongly about it. How do we deal with that middle category?
So Brian, you're just typing on page 2, right? About the process.
Yeah, somewhere under next steps. Yeah.
Would you post it, Brian?
Yeah, I think so. Is that, am I the right person to do it?
I'm not fully I would not say that you would be the only person who could do it as a source, but I think it would be coherent as you also invited us for this call. So I would be happy if you would do it. Thank you.
Right. I would say reach out. Yeah.
Okay.
And there would be some kind of time frame.
Like 1 week or some.
Yeah, 2 maybe.
I only say 2 because it sounds like at times people are traveling or whatever.
Yeah.
What's begin again?
It's what I heard Bernard trying to say, that we can use this moment to kind of begin again in the network with the new name.
Oh, I see.
Right, and kind of new energy, new clarity. My shorthand. Okay.
And then comes the time when we are collecting ideas how to put together something like a logo or something, right?
You know, Brian, I just, you know, a name is a name. I know the clarity you've talked about in terms of our DDO lineage is important and meaningful, and whether that's in your email or if that's in the description or the celebration. But I just, the word begin again makes it sound like, oh, it's a New Year's resolution and we're going to begin again versus how to, you know, I don't know. Yeah, right. Thank you.
I like it.
All right.
Okay.
There should be a core group in about 1 week's time.
Yeah, I think it's next week.
Mm-hmm.
I think this, the thinking of how we could use this, but I'm wondering what could be done to use this new name as a instrument to re-energize the network.
Yeah. Well, you know, both could happen. This new clarity might. There might be some people that opt out. Say, no, I wanted to be part of the bigger, and we should be okay with that. But I think there could be a re-energization, exactly what you're saying around, oh, you know, this clarity brings renewed focus and renewed energy about what we are doing.
So for me, if I would not have been more part of this process, so if I would have been more like a passive outstander here, and after this process, I would get a PowerPoint presentation, a slide deck with, I don't know, 8 slides, 5 slides, explaining the network and the name of the network, and then explaining the network with the name. I think this would help me to invite others and to say, this is what I'm part of, and this is what I'm happy to be part of, and wouldn't you want to join? So this would be, for me, also helpful to find words. I find that many people are having a hard time explaining the whole DDO concept and again the living system concept, and so having some kind of document that helps me to explain would be another step.
And is that, how do you see that different than what we have as a document with a purpose and the premise and all that?
For me, it would have a third of the text probably. It would be less dialectical. It would be easier. So it would be just the DDO lineage. What is it? Okay, the Korean next chant, Keegan. Okay, then we have Brian started the network. Okay, then the living system approach. What is it?
So, okay, so that's interesting because what I'm hearing is a narrative.
Yeah.
And I mean, it would be really nice to have, you know, and if you could, I don't know, it's 5 minutes video of the story, of the narrative.
Yeah.
Because, and the reason I'm thinking of narrative as opposed to PowerPoint is that you're saying, Bernard, people are confused, and they need, and the more creating a summary of our purpose document is going to be even more confusing, because the less, but I think what people need is a story. So
yeah, fully agree. And it's just that I wouldn't invest too much energy into a very good, very well-made video as long as we don't have a logo.
Right.
But still,
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, maybe we don't need something really sophisticated, but and it might be nice maybe to run it as an interview. Somebody in the network could interview Brian and have that story, and it'd be
wonderful.
spontaneous and
yeah.
Okay.
All right, I've got people waiting outside my door.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.